The research ship Serenity's dream was in serious trouble. Captain Nyrell gripped his control chair as another violent shake ran through the vessel. Outside the viewport, the massive gas giant Kronos 7 filled their view, its swirling storms and crushing gravity pulling them closer with each passing minute. Nyrell belonged to the Valix, a peaceful race that looked like living crystal sculptures. His people had never faced war or dangerous worlds. They spent their lives studying stars and planets from the safety of their advanced ships. But now, their most sophisticated research vessel was falling apart around them. "Captain, we're losing hull integrity on decks 7 through 12, called out his science officer, Velen. Her voice cracked with fear as she watched the readings on her screen. "The gravitational stress is tearing us apart." Another section of the ship groaned and buckled. The lights flickered as power systems began failing. Nyrell could hear the distant sound of metal bending and snapping under forces no Valix ship was built to handle. "How long before we reach the crush zone?" Nyrell asked, though he dreaded the answer. "At our current trajectory, maybe 18 hours, Velen replied. "But our hull won't last that long. We're already showing microfractures throughout the superstructure." Nyrell looked around the bridge at his crew. 623 of the galaxy's best researchers were aboard this ship. Biologists, physicists, stellar cartographers, and xenoarchaeologists who had devoted their lives to peaceful exploration. They had families waiting for them on Valix Prime. Children who would never see their parents again if he failed to act. "Send out the emergency beacon," Nyrell ordered. "Maximum power on all Galactic Council frequencies. Someone has to be close enough to help." His communications officer, Jorvath, worked frantically at his console. "Beacon active, Captain. Broadcasting our position and status on all standard emergency channels." The distress signal shot out from their dying ship, carrying their desperate plea across the void. It contained their ship's identification, their exact location, the number of crew aboard, and the critical nature of their situation. Any Galactic Council ship receiving the message would be bound by law to render immediate assistance. But space is vast, and the Valix had been exploring far from the usual shipping lanes. Their research mission had brought them to this remote system to study the unusual gravitational effects around Kronos 7. Now that same gravity was killing them. "Any response?" Nyrell asked after several minutes. "Nothing yet, Captain. But the signal is propagating through the relay network. If there's a council patrol within 3 systems, they should receive it within the hour." Nyrell nodded, trying to project calm he didn't feel. The Valix were not a species built for crisis. Their world was peaceful, with low gravity and no dangerous predators. They had evolved to be thinkers and creators, not survivors. As the minutes ticked by, more systems failed. The artificial gravity fluctuated, making some crew members feel sick. The air recyclers struggled to keep up as small atmosphere leaks appeared throughout the ship. The once quiet hum of their advanced engines was replaced by concerning rattles and grinding noises. "Captain," Velen called out, her voice tight with worry. "I'm detecting a cascade failure in the relay network. Our signal, it's being rerouted." "Rerouted where?" "I'm not sure. The ancient relay stations sometimes malfunction. Our distress call is bouncing between nodes, but not toward any known council territories." Nyrell felt his heart sink. The Galactic Council's communication network was thousands of years old, built by species long extinct. While mostly reliable, it occasionally developed glitches that sent messages to random destinations across the galaxy. "Keep monitoring," he said. "Maybe it will correct itself." But even as he spoke, Nyrell could see their situation worsening. More hull breaches appeared as Kronos 7's gravity twisted their ship like a piece of clay. The research laboratories were already sealed off, their delicate equipment crushed by the mounting pressure. His crew looked to him for leadership, but what could he tell them? That help might not come. That their peaceful mission of discovery might end in a crushing death spiral into an alien world's atmosphere. Instead, Tyrell stood straighter and spoke with more confidence than he felt. Continue all emergency procedures. Monitor the beacon's progress. And prepare emergency pods, just in case. Unknown to the Valix captain, their misdirected distress call was traveling through subspace toward a region of the galaxy marked only as Quarantine Zone on most star charts. A place where dangerous species were rumored to exist. Species that the Council preferred to avoid. As Serenity's dream continued its slow death dance with Kronos 7, Captain Tyrell could only hope that someone, somewhere, would hear their cry for help. Admiral Jake Morrison was having a rough day, and it was about to get much worse. He stood on the bridge of the massive battleship Retribution, scrolling through damage reports on his tablet. The Third Human Colonial Fleet had just spent 2 weeks hunting down pirate raiders in the Outer Rim territories, and while they'd won every engagement, his ships were battered and his crews were exhausted. 17 dead, 43 wounded across the fleet, Morrison muttered to his executive officer, Commander Bradley. And the Yorktown still has a hole in her port hull that'll take 3 days to patch properly. Bradley nodded grimly. At least we got them all, sir. Those pirates won't be raiding any more civilian convoys. Morrison was about to respond when Lieutenant Parker at the communications station suddenly straightened up. Her headset was crackling with static, and she was adjusting dials frantically. Admiral, she called out, her voice cutting through the bridge chatter. I'm picking up something strange on the long-range receivers. It's definitely not human, sir. Morrison looked up from his reports. In his 23 years of military service, he'd learned to pay attention when his communications officers sounded worried. What kind of not human, Parker? Unknown transmission, sir. The computer can't identify the language or the signal format. But the pattern, it looks like a distress call. The Admiral walked over to her station, his boots clicking on the metal deck plates. Around him, the bridge crew continued their work, but he could sense their attention focusing on the conversation. First contact with alien species was every spacer's dream and nightmare rolled into one. Can you clean it up? Morrison asked. Parker's fingers danced over her controls. Working on it, sir. The signal's pretty degraded, like it's been bouncing around the relay network for a while. Slowly, the static cleared enough for them to hear the alien transmission. Even without understanding the words, the tone was unmistakable. Panic, desperation, and the universal sound of someone calling for help. Definitely a distress call, Morrison confirmed. Can we locate the source? Give me a minute, sir. Parker worked with the ship's artificial intelligence to triangulate the signal. Got it. Bearing 27 Mark IV, approximately 8 light-hours away. Morrison turned to his sensor officer. Bradley, what do we have in that direction? Commander Bradley consulted his instruments. Long-range sensors show a gas giant system, sir. And, wait. His face grew serious. There's a vessel in distress near the largest planet. It's small, maybe a research ship, and it's falling into the gravity well. Morrison studied the tactical display that appeared on the main screen. The alien ship was a tiny dot slowly spiraling toward a massive planet that could crush it like an egg. Even from this distance, their sensors could tell the vessel was in bad shape. Time to impact. 18 hours, sir. Maybe less if their orbit degrades faster. Morrison looked around his bridge. His crew was tired, his ships were damaged, and they were supposed to be heading home for repairs and shore leave. But there was a ship full of aliens about to die, and apparently, no one else was close enough to help. Any other vessels in the area? He asked, though he already suspected the answer. Negative, Admiral. We're the only ships within 3 systems. The nearest Council patrol is probably days away, even at maximum speed. Morrison stood silent for a moment, weighing his options. They could continue on their planned route and let someone else handle the alien ship. It wasn't their responsibility, and his crews needed rest. But 18 hours wasn't much time, and those beings were going to die if someone didn't act fast. The admiral had served in the colonial navy since he was 18 years old. He'd fought pirates, rebels, and hostile alien species. But he'd also rescued stranded miners, evacuated colonies from natural disasters, and pulled civilians out of burning space stations. It was what humans did. When someone needed help, you helped them, even if they were strangers. Even if they were aliens you'd never met before. Parker, signal the fleet. All ships are to alter course immediately. Best speed to the alien vessel's position. Sir. Bradley looked surprised. Our orders were to return to base 4 dash. Orders change, Commander. There are people dying out there, and we're the only ones who can save them. Morrison turned back to Parker. And get me Captain Rodriguez on the Normandy. We're going to need his marine boarding teams ready for rescue operations. As the fleet began changing course, Morrison wondered what they were getting themselves into. First contact with an unknown alien species during a rescue mission wasn't exactly in any of the training manuals. But sometimes, you had to make it up as you went along. Captain Tyrell was staring at his flickering display screens when the proximity alarms suddenly went crazy. His science officer, Velen, looked up from her station with wide eyes filled with both hope and terror. Captain, multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace, she announced, her crystalline voice trembling. The energy signatures are enormous. Tyrell felt his heart skip as he watched the sensor readings. Finally, someone had received their distress call. But as the ships materialized from the brilliant flashes of faster-than-light travel, his relief quickly turned to shock. These weren't the smooth, graceful vessels of the Galactic Council that he'd expected. Instead, what appeared before them were massive warships that looked like they'd been built for one purpose only, fighting. The ships were dark gray and covered in thick armor plating. Weapon turrets jutted out from every surface, and scorch marks along their hulls told the story of recent battles. By the light of the first star, whispered Velen, using an old Valix blessing. What are those things? The largest ship was absolutely massive, easily 10 times the size of their research vessel. It bristled with so many weapons that Tyrell couldn't count them all. Smaller ships flanked it on both sides, moving with military precision that spoke of experienced combat crews. Are they council ships? Asked Jorvath from the communication station, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. No, Tyrell replied quietly. I've never seen anything like them in any council database. As they watched in stunned silence, the alien fleet took up positions around their dying ship. It was clearly a rescue formation, but it looked more like they were being surrounded by predators. The ships moved with the smooth efficiency of a pack that had hunted together many times before. Captain, Velen said, her voice barely above a whisper. They're launching smaller craft. Several shuttle-sized vessels detached from the largest warship and approached Serenity's Dream. Even these smaller ships looked heavily armored and bristling with weapons. As they got closer, Tyrell could see they were designed for boarding operations, not peaceful contact. What do we do? Jorvath asked. They could be hostile. Tyrell considered their options. They were hours away from being crushed by Chronos 7's gravity, their ship was falling apart around them, and they had no weapons to speak of. Whether these aliens were friendly or not, the Valix were completely at their mercy. Open all communication channels, Tyrell decided. If they wanted to destroy us, they would have done it already. Before Jorvath could respond, a bright light filled the bridge. The air itself seemed to shimmer and twist as figures began materializing right in front of them. Tyrell had heard of transporter technology, but he'd never seen it used so casually. What appeared before them made the captain take an involuntary step backward. The beings were tall, much taller than any Valix, and they were completely encased in powered armor that looked like it could withstand artillery fire. The armor was black and gray, with glowing displays and sensor arrays built into the helmets. Each figure radiated heat like a small furnace, their internal body temperatures reading at levels that would kill most known species. The lead figure reached up and disengaged his helmet with a series of mechanical clicks. What was revealed underneath made Thyrol's breath catch in his throat. The being had skin that looked like it had been exposed to harsh environments, with several visible scars across his face. But it was his eyes that truly unsettled the Valix captain. They were the eyes of someone who had seen too much violence, too much death. "I'm Captain Rodriguez, United Colonial Marines," the human said, his voice deep and rough. "We received your distress call." Tyrell stared at this creature whose very presence seemed to make the air around him warmer. The human was clearly a warrior, built for combat in ways that the peaceful Valix could barely comprehend. Everything about him, from his scarred face to his casual confidence in the face of danger, spoke of a species that had fought for survival. You came to help us?" Tyrell managed to ask, hardly believing what he was hearing. Captain Rodriguez looked around the bridge, taking in the failing systems and the terrified crew with professional assessment. "That's what we do," he replied simply, as if risking their lives for complete strangers was the most natural thing in the world. Without waiting for permission, the human captain began directing his team to different parts of the ship. They moved with military efficiency, their armor clanking against the delicate corridors of the research vessel. Each human seemed to instinctively know where the most critical repairs were needed. "Don't worry," Rodriguez told Tyrell, his scarred face showing genuine concern. "We'll get you out of here. My people are already working on stabilizing your orbit and patching your hull breaches." Tyrell watched in amazement as these armored giants spread throughout his ship. They worked with tools that looked more like weapons, and they treated the deadly radiation and crushing gravity like minor inconveniences. It was clear that these humans came from a world far more dangerous than anything the Valix had ever imagined. As Captain Rodriguez coordinated the rescue effort, Tyrell realized that their distress call had reached exactly the right people, even if they were the most terrifying rescuers he could have possibly imagined. What happened next left the Valix crew staring in complete disbelief. The humans spread throughout Serenity's dream like they owned the place, moving through areas that were registering deadly radiation levels that would kill most species in minutes. But these armored figures just walked right through the danger zones as if they were strolling through a garden. Sergeant Kelly Davis led her engineering team straight to the ship's power core, which was currently leaking enough radiation to sterilize a small moon. The Valix engineers had sealed off the entire section hours ago, writing it off as a total loss. But Davis and her people just marched right in, their armor's radiation badges barely registering the lethal environment. "This is insane," whispered Velen, watching through the security cameras as the human sergeant actually grabbed the failing power core with her armored hands. No being should be able to survive in that room. But survive they did. Davis and her team physically lifted the massive power core, something that should have required specialized anti-gravity equipment and a team of 20 Valix technicians working in a sterile environment. Instead, these humans just picked it up like it was a piece of furniture and carried it out. "Radiation levels in Section 7 are dropping," reported Jorvath in amazement. "They actually fixed it." Meanwhile, Corporal Danny Martinez was working in the life support bay with tools that looked more like weapons than precision instruments. The Valix watched in horror as he literally tore apart their delicate atmospheric processors and started rebuilding them using parts from his own equipment. What he was doing should have been impossible. Their life support systems required clean room conditions and micro-precise calibration. But somehow, it worked. The air in the ship started getting cleaner, and the temperature began stabilizing. Martinez was fixing their most advanced technology using what looked like spare parts and pure stubbornness. "How are they doing this?" Tyrell asked his chief engineer, Kelvorn, who was monitoring the humans' work with growing amazement. "I have no idea, Captain. They're using techniques that violate every safety protocol we know. But their success rate is 100%. Every system they touch starts working better than before." The most shocking moment came when the ship's structural engineer announced that their hull integrity had dropped to 15%. The Serenity's dream was literally coming apart under the gravitational stress, with metal beams bending and bulkheads starting to buckle. "We're breaking up, Captain," the engineer reported, his voice shaking with fear. The ship can't take much more of this. That's when Lieutenant Colonel Beth Thompson's voice came over their communications system from the human flagship. Her tone was so casual that she might have been discussing the weather. "No problem," she said. "We'll just pull you out of the gravity well." Tyrell looked at his crew in confusion. "Pull us out? With what?" His question was answered when the massive human warship Retribution positioned itself above them and activated its tractor beam. But this wasn't like the gentle guidance systems used by Council rescue ships. This was a military-grade beam designed for moving asteroids and capturing enemy vessels. The Valix crew felt the entire ship shudder as the tractor beam locked onto them. Then, impossibly, they began moving. The crushing gravity of Kronos 7, which had been slowly tearing their ship apart, suddenly seemed like nothing more than a minor inconvenience as the human warship dragged them away from the gas giant. "This is impossible," breathed Kelvorn. "The gravitational forces should be tearing both ships apart. No known material can withstand this kind of stress." But the humans made it look easy. The Retribution pulled Serenity's Dream through gravitational fields that would have crushed any other rescue ship, treating the deadly environment like it was just another day at the office. As they watched their ship's readings return to normal, the Valix crew began to understand something terrifying about their rescuers. These humans didn't just come from a dangerous world, they came from a world so hostile that what would kill other species was just background noise to them. "Captain," Velen said quietly, "look at their biological readings." Tyrell checked the sensors focused on the human rescue teams. What he saw made his blood run cold. These beings were operating at internal temperatures that would boil the blood of most species. Their heart rates were elevated to levels that should have caused cardiac arrest. And their muscle density readings were off the charts. They're built for war, Tyrell realized. Their entire species is built for surviving in conditions that would kill us instantly. When the rescue was finally complete and Serenity's Dream was safely orbiting in stable space, Captain Rodriguez found Tyrell on the bridge. The human looked tired but satisfied, like he'd just finished a routine training exercise rather than an impossible rescue operation. "We've run diagnostics on your ship," Rodriguez reported. "Your systems are stable enough for the journey home. We've also plotted a course to the nearest Council space, should take you about 4 days at your maximum safe speed." Tyrell stared at this scarred warrior who had just casually accomplished what should have required a full Council rescue fleet with specialized equipment. "How?" was all the Valix captain could manage to ask. Rodriguez looked puzzled. "How what? How did you do all this? The radiation, the gravity, the structural repairs, it should have been impossible." The human captain shrugged, as if the question didn't make much sense. "We just did what needed to be done. That's what you do in an emergency, right?" As Rodriguez walked away to check on his teams, Tyrell realized that to these humans, saving his crew hadn't been some heroic feat, it had just been Tuesday. Captain Tyrell sat alone in his quarters, staring at the official report form on his screen. The cursor blinked at him mockingly as he tried to figure out what to write. "How do you explain to the Galactic Council that you've just made contact with a species that could probably conquer half the known galaxy without breaking a sweat?" Through his viewport, he could see the human fleet preparing to leave. Their massive warships hung in space like sleeping predators, their weapon arrays and armor plating making even the Council's most advanced military vessels look like children's toys. But what bothered Tyrell most wasn't their obvious military power, it was how casually they'd used it to save lives. A soft chime indicated someone at his door. "Come in," he called. Velen entered, her crystalline features reflecting the light from his desk lamp. "Captain, the humans are requesting departure clearance. Admiral Morrison wants to know if there's anything else we need before they leave." Tyrell almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Here was a fleet that could probably take on the entire Council Navy, and they were politely asking permission to leave after saving 623 lives. It was the most terrifying display of good manners he'd ever witnessed. "What do our regulations say about this situation?" he asked his science officer. Velen's expression grew troubled. Protocol 7 Alpha is very clear, Captain. Any contact with unregistered species from quarantine zones must be reported immediately to Council Command. Especially species showing advanced military capabilities. Tyrell nodded slowly. He knew the regulations by heart. The Galactic Council had strict rules about contact with dangerous species, and these humans certainly qualified as dangerous. Their casual disregard for lethal radiation, their ability to operate in gravitational fields that would crush most ships, and their military efficiency all marked them as what the Council called a Deathworld species. But there was something else bothering him. In all his years of service, he'd never seen a rescue operation handled with such competence and genuine care. The humans hadn't hesitated to risk their own lives for complete strangers. They'd refused all offers of payment or reward. Admiral Morrison had personally visited Serenity's Dream before leaving, not to negotiate or make demands, but simply to make sure the Valix crew was comfortable for the journey home. "Sir." Velen pressed gently. "What should I tell them?" Before Tyrell could answer, his communications officer Jorvath appeared in the doorway. "Captain, Admiral Morrison is on the comm. He says they've detected some structural weaknesses in our hull that their teams didn't have time to fully repair. He's offering to leave behind some of their emergency repair kits and technical manuals in case we run into problems on the way home." Tyrell closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. Even now, as they were leaving, the humans were still trying to take care of his crew. These weren't the actions of an aggressive, militaristic species. These were the actions of people who genuinely cared about others. "Captain," Velen said quietly, "there's something else you should know. I've been analyzing the sensor data from their rescue operation." "What did you find?" "They're ships, sir. I don't think they were designed primarily as warships. The weapon systems and armor appear to be additions, modifications made to what were originally exploration and colonization vessels." Tyrell opened his eyes. "You mean they're explorers? Like us?" "I think so, Captain. But explorers from a world so dangerous that even their civilian ships need military-grade protection just to survive." The implications of that hit Tyrell like a physical blow. If Velen was right, then these humans weren't conquerors or warriors by nature. They were explorers and researchers who'd been forced to become fighters simply to survive in their corner of the galaxy. They'd developed their incredible military capabilities not to attack others, but to defend themselves. "Sir," Jorvath said urgently, "Admiral Morrison is waiting for a response." "What should I tell him?" Tyrell made his decision. He turned to his computer and began typing rapidly. "Tell the Admiral that we're grateful for his offer and accept the repair kits. Grant his fleet safe passage to the edge of our territorial space, with our thanks." "And the report to Council Command?" Velen asked. Tyrell paused, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. If he reported this encounter, the Council would likely classify humans as a threat to be contained or eliminated. They wouldn't see the compassion and selflessness he'd witnessed. They'd only see the weapons and armor, the casual way these beings operated in lethal environments. But if he didn't report it, he'd be violating his oath as a council officer. And if the humans were eventually discovered by others, his failure to warn the council could have serious consequences. "Classification level," his computer prompted. Tyrell typed slowly, "Deep research protocol, extended analysis required." It was a bureaucratic gray area that would bury the report in committee reviews for months, possibly years. It wasn't exactly hiding the encounter, but it wasn't broadcasting it either. It would give him time to think, time to analyze what the humans really represented. As the human fleet began disappearing into hyperspace, their engines creating brilliant flashes of light, Tyrell watched from his viewport. In a few moments, they'd be gone, leaving only fading energy signatures and a ship full of confused Valix who'd just been saved by the galaxy's most unlikely heroes. Velen joined him at the viewport. "Do you think we'll see them again?" Tyrell considered the question. Somewhere out there, these humans were continuing their exploration of the galaxy, probably rescuing other ships in distress and making more first contacts. Eventually, someone would report them to the council. The question was whether that report would paint them as saviors or threats. "I hope so," Tyrell said finally. "But next time, I hope the galaxy is ready for them." As the last human ship vanished into hyperspace, Captain Tyrell wondered if he'd just made the most important decision of his career. Only time would tell whether he protected the galaxy from humanity, or protected humanity from the galaxy. Either way, he knew he'd never forget the day his distress call was answered by angels with armor and weapons.